Okay, let's talk about philosophy. Let's talk about how to make your arguments stronger, and really the 10 things you really have to avoid if you want to be someone who makes really strong logical arguments. Now, I read philosophy in university. For my undergrad, I read politics, philosophy, and economics. I did a master's in philosophy and politics. I started a PhD in philosophy. So I've actually spent a long time thinking about critical thinking and sort of logical reasoning. And here are 10 big mistakes people make when they're reasoning that you need to avoid so that you have stronger arguments. The first one, ad hominem. This is a very popular one that you'll see all the time, especially in politics, when rather than engaging with someone's argument, you just insult them and go for a personal attack. So an example you often get is, how can this man be right? I mean, he wears socks with sandals, right? And you might think you've owned somebody, but in reality, you haven't dealt with their argument. Instead, you've just made a joke at their expense. People do this all the time, insulting the person with a personal insult designed to attack their character or integrity, but not actually engaging with the argument they're making. The next one is strawmanning. You might have heard this before, or the straw man. This is basically when you cheapen or reduce someone's idea to its weakest and then attack that, and essentially to make yourself look stronger. Actually, it makes you look weak because you're misrepresenting them. So when someone says we should be healthier, right, or children should eat more healthily or something like that, and someone goes, oh, so you're basically suggesting all children should survive on kale and air, and everyone goes, yeah, that's ridiculous. You might think you've won there, but that's a straw man. Like, that's not what they said at all. That's a weak version of their argument that you've then knocked down. The best thing to do about this, if you want to make yourself a better, sort of more rigorous thinker, is steelman people's ideas. So come up with the best possible conception of someone's idea. It's called applying the principle of charity in philosophy. And once you've done that, you can then knock that down. Because if you can knock down a strong version of someone's idea, it means you're actually smarter. You're knocking down something that's difficult to knock down rather than something that's easy to knock down. The third fallacy, which is really popular, especially in the UK, is the appeal to authority. And this is when someone makes an argument basically grounded in virtues they think someone who's an authoritative figure has. So I'll give you an example. You got a famous scientist called Neil deGrasse Tyson. Some people might say, well, this is true because, I mean, obviously Neil deGrasse Tyson said it. I mean, just because a famous scientist said it doesn't mean it's true. It happens sometimes as well when maybe you're looking at some data and someone goes, I mean, this data is from the police. It must be true. That's not rational or logical thinking. Just because an authoritative figure said something doesn't mean it's true. It's still worth investigating the claims or looking at what the person said. Number 4. We are now at number 4. This is the famous slippery slope argument. This is actually a really forceful one in politics, right? Because it plays onto people's fear. Essentially, it takes a simple, maybe idea and starts to kind of consider all the consequences and then kind of goes into something extreme. Like, oh, this child wants a pet goldfish. Before you know it, he's going to want a pet tiger. And you go, okay, that's not, that's a long way away. And in fact, it's not necessarily true that you're going to end up there. The way to avoid this is to consider each logical step and not allow someone to get away with suggesting that. So you get all the time, if we legalize marijuana, before you know it, every single drug in the world will be legal. Maybe, but it's not necessarily true, and so we need to investigate each sort of step on that sort of slippery slope rather than granting them what they're saying. Number 5 often happens when friends argue is the false dilemma. This is when people narrow down the multiplicity of choices that exist into just 2. So people say stuff like, you either love pineapple on pizza or you hate pizza. You go, those aren't, I mean, that's just a false dilemma. Those aren't the binary choices that exist. There's lots of options that exist between loving pineapple on pizza or hating pizza. Don't let people force you into this false sense of there's only 2 options or this false binary. You can actually explore other opportunities or other ideas that they haven't said themselves. Oh, by the way, one of the things that's also going to be helpful about this video is when you learn these logical fallacies, right? What we call logical fallacies, it's going to make it easier for you to also spot when you're watching the news, when you are listening to debates, people who are actually formidable and really good thinkers, and folks who just get involved in like fallacies, which makes their arguments weak. We're at number 6, and I am running out of hands. Number 6 is circular reasoning. You've probably heard this before. This is when someone says, this product is the best product because it's the best. And you go, that doesn't make sense. To avoid that, you have to provide independent reasons that aren't subject to, why is the Bible true? Well, because the Bible's true. Why is the Bible true? Well, because the Bible says it's true. And you go, well, that's circular. You need to find an independent sort of party or arbiter or someone who's not involved. They have to be the one who make the case, not the thing itself. Number 7 is hasty generalization. People do this all the time. They go, oh yeah, New Yorkers are like this because when I went to New York the other day, one guy was so full of himself. Well, that's just because you met one guy who's a certain way doesn't mean everyone is that way. People often do that. Londoners are so rude. You go, why? Well, last week, and then they give some anecdotal experience, not doubting what they experience may be true, but because you experience one thing, it doesn't mean everyone is like that. Okay, number 8. I'm going to speak some Latin now, but it's really simple. Post hoc, ergo propter hoc. And this basically is sort of like, correlation isn't causation. So if someone says something like, oh, I wore my lucky socks that day and we won, doesn't mean they won because they wore their lucky socks, right? Just because something correlates doesn't mean it's caused by the thing. So a more serious example you often get is people saying that the minute Mayor Bloomberg became mayor, crime fell to historic lows in New York. He is clearly the best mayor we've had on crime. And you go, whoa, that's not quite rational, right? That's not logical. That's a logical fallacy. You have to be careful not to always think because something positively correlates, it means they're caused by each other. You've got number 9. We're racing to number 10 now. Appeal to ignorance. This is when people say something like, well, because no one's ever proved Bigfoot doesn't exist, and so for that reason, who's to say it doesn't exist? This is ridiculous, as you can imagine. One, Bigfoot is fictional, but even away from that, it's hard to prove a negative. It's hard to prove conclusively that something doesn't exist. What would proof like that look like? I mean, how would you prove that? And so that appeal to lacking that knowledge or not being able to acquire that knowledge doesn't mean what they're saying is then by proxy true. So it's like someone might say something like, well, no one can prove I wasn't at her house at 3 p.m. You go, yeah, but that's just an illogical way to think. People often do this all the time. Number 10 is a very simple one, which we as human beings are very, very susceptible to, and it's the bandwagon fallacy. Because everyone's going that way must be right? Everyone's jumping off a cliff, it must be fun. Because everyone agrees on this, because most people are that way, it must be true. There's something forceful there. It's not always the case. You can still think independently. Okay, bonus. That took way longer than I thought it would take. Number 11, reductio ad absurdum. This is when people take someone's argument and they stretch it to such an extreme so as to make it seem absurd. Someone saying something like, well, I think you should be more careful what you say. And someone goes, oh, so I should just never speak again. Is that what you're saying? I should be gagged. My free speech should be taken away. You go, that's not what I said. Or so I should be locked up. And you go, no, that's an absurd, extreme exaggeration of what I said. My argument is that you should be more careful what you're saying. These logical fallacies are commonplace because human beings were kind of lazy. So rather than doing all the work of following an argument logically, we normally jump to the end or look for shortcuts. And that's why people start saying weird things, odd things. And you now know 10 things you need to avoid if you're trying to make arguments that are forceful and you're trying to be clearer. And it will make you annoying, right? Because you start calling people out. Like, hold on a minute, that's a reductio ad absurdum. But actually, what it's going to make you to be is a far more rigorous thinker. Let me know which one's your favorite one in the comment section. I will see you in the next video.